Yes, I understand the appeal to Kyler Murray, especially now that teams can get him for the league minimum. And teams can get him for the league minimum because Arizona is going to pay him close to $37 million to not play for him next year, to play for somebody else. And full disclosure, a while back when his name got brought up as far as trade talks were concerned, obviously the Cardinals, I would assume, tried to trade him, couldn't, and cut him, and that's what happened there. But when his name got brought up as a trade target, I had mentioned on these airwaves how I was intrigued by his mobility. In full transparency, I still am. It's a quarterback with over 3,200 career rushing yards, 32 rushing touchdowns. But we've got to take a deeper dive into this guy. And when you do that, you should want the Steelers to avoid him like the plague. And before I get into why I think Mike McCarthy and the Steelers need to steer clear of this guy, let me be clear. 43-year-old Aaron Rodgers does not have me jumping through hoops, excited about next fall for the Steelers should he be, willing to come back and willing to be the Steelers quarterback next season. But I would not hesitate to pay Aaron Rodgers $13.5 million again, or whatever it was last season. I wouldn't hesitate to copy and paste the 2025 contract for 2026, overpaying Kyler Murray the league minimum. And I don't even think I would need to think twice about it. And I'm pretty confident that that's a fresh opinion as far as the people that talk into this microphone on this station are concerned. Why? And for starters, he's injury prone. Over the last 3 seasons, he's missed 41% of Cardinals games. Now, that 41% of games the last 3 seasons, not all because of injuries. So I will give him the benefit of the doubt there. But some of that 41% comes from just being benched, which last I checked is also not very good. Secondly, speaking of not being very good, Kyler Murray is not, in my opinion, a very good quarterback. And in the middle of a couple of injury-ridden seasons, 2023 and last year, he was pretty solid in 2024, 3,800 passing yards, 21 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, ran for 570 yards, 5 touchdowns, completion percentage around 68%. Yeah, those numbers are fine. Those numbers are better than what Aaron Rodgers put into those same stat columns last season. But if we go a layer or two deeper into the numbers on Kyler Murray, I've talked about the EPA, the advanced metric on my shows before, expected points added. Let's dive into where Kyler Murray ranks in a couple of those EPA categories. How about in air throws over 10 air yards? The last couple of seasons, Murray 34th out of 34 quarterbacks in throws over 10 air yards. From 2022 to 2024, he was 41st out of 41 quarterbacks in throws over 25 yards down the field. Dead last does not necessarily add up to the skill set of the only wide receiver it seems like the Steelers have on their roster right now in DK Metcalf, does it? Lastly, and probably most importantly, the character issues and the questions surrounding his overall devotion to football. Let's go back to that 2022 season. In July, prior to 2022, he signed that 5-year, $230 million extension that he just got released from. And throughout those whole negotiations, you remember correctly, the Cardinals had to put in a clause in that contract for, as I say it out loud, 4 years later, it's still unbelievably ridiculous, for how much film he had to watch during the week. Stupid. After he signs that contract, they lose the final 7 games of the season. They finish 4-13. And an anonymous teammate went on the record and told a reporter with Bally Sports that signing him to that extension was like the Cardinals, was like they created a monster. That was an actual quote from an anonymous teammate to a reporter. Also in that report, this quote, he felt less compulsion to study his game plan or to fulfill the expectations of the franchise quarterback position than he had in the past. I don't care how mobile he is or how much of ability that Kyler Murray has to being the next Sam Darnold and have the next career 180. That's who you want to be the Steelers starting quarterback next season? You want another example? Here's a more recent one. Rich Cimini, Jets insider, has covered the Jets for over 30 years. And the Jets obviously need a quarterback as well. And when it was being talked about back in, trade talk with Kyler Murray and the Jets as a possible destination, Rich Cimini, again, very respected NFL insider and has covered one of the more coverable teams in the Jets over the last 4 decades, said this on his podcast. I was talking to someone. This report was, by the way, back at the beginning of the month, February 5th. I was talking to someone, one of his former teammates the other day, and he basically warned off the Jets about him. I said, the Jets might be going after Kyler in a month. He goes, no. The Jets don't want to do that. You don't want Kyler Murray as your quarterback, another former teammate. One more time for good measure. No, thank you. Now, is Aaron Rodgers a night and day alternative as far as on-field production goes in 2026? Probably not. You could actually probably make a case that Murray will have a better season statistically next year than Rodgers, and I won't necessarily disagree with you. But next year for the Steelers isn't about which quarterback will play better and which one will win you more games. Next year is and should be about the segue into drafting your franchise quarterback in 2027. Despite what the Rooneys think, and despite what Art will say on the record, this roster is not good enough to win a Super Bowl next season, and there's nothing the Steelers can realistically do this offseason to make them a Super Bowl contender. So because of all that, bring back Rodgers. If he wants to come back, bring him back. If he doesn't, find somebody not named Kyler Murray or roll the dice with a combination of Mason Rudolph or Will Howard. And that should hit some buzzwords with the Will Howard folk out there. For the record, I'm not one of them, but this goes back to a couple of themes that I've had in shows past. If you want Will Howard to get a shot next season to prove if he can play or not, you want Aaron Rodgers back. Because I feel like that there's a situation in a scenario where Will Howard just beats Mason Rudolph out to be the number 2, and then he's one game away from something happening to a 43-year-old from getting in there and proving in a regular season matchup that he is capable of being an NFL starting quarterback. Going back to Murray and the questions about his character, and this is probably the biggest reason why I want the Steelers nowhere near this guy in free agency. Based off of everything we know about the type of guy that Kyler Murray is, seems to be, I feel like it's reasonable to predict he'd come to Pittsburgh and his teammates would hate him. And despite the receivers room being pretty much depleted, there are several starters on that offense that I would like to think that are going to be around the next time the Steelers are actually competitive in a postseason game with a franchise quarterback. DK Metcalf is one of those guys. He's under contract for the next 4 years. Pat Freiermuth under contract through 2028. They might bring back Calvin Austin, a guy that's been here and a guy that I could potentially see still being here on a contract extension. And then you've got the three young guys on the offensive line, Zach Frazier, Troy Fautanu, Mason McCormick. And then hopefully they add a rookie receiver or two in the draft. It's a lot of youth and a lot of guys locked up long term that I don't want to expose to a quarterback who just flat out sucks to play with. And there is black and white proof that Kyler Murray is not a good guy to play with and be in a locker room with for the majority of his football career, which started in 2019. And I don't want to expose those young players on offense to that guy, especially when there's no trade-off of, okay, yeah, he's a bad guy, but man, he puts us over the hump. And with Kyler Murray as our starting quarterback, we immediately become Super Bowl contenders. So just deal with it because you might win it all. That's not on the table here. And on the other hand, you have Rodgers, a guy that objectively was well-liked by probably 95 to 99% of that locker room last season, both players and coaches. And I know the coaches are different, but they're not different to Rodgers. And he talked about that yesterday on Pat McAfee when we all thought that Rodgers would say, yeah, you know, I'm done, or yeah, you know what, I'm coming back to the Steelers. Obviously, we didn't get that, but he did talk about how familiar he was with a bunch of the guys that Mike McCarthy hired onto his coaching staff. When there is no possibility on the table of sign this guy and it makes you a contender immediately, I'm not sure what there is to talk about here when it comes to Kyler Murray. Oh, he might be the next Sam Darnold and hit the career reset and have the next career 180 arc like Sam Darnold just had. First of all, there's no guarantee that we're going to see that right away from anybody, from any quarterback in the league. I feel like Sam Darnold doing that is pretty unique, and he deserves more credit for that. And number two, you're going to expect a guy who needed a clause in his contract to watch an X amount of film and prepare an X amount of time throughout the week? You're going to expect a guy like that to have the willpower and work ethic to do that with a new team and a new spot? I'm not. I'm certainly not. Like I said, the good news is that Minnesota seems like a much more attractive destination for a guy like Kyler Murray. Offensive head coach in Kevin O'Connell, one of the best receivers in football in Justin Jefferson, good offensive line. They play indoors, something I didn't mention with Kyler Murray earlier. Kyler Murray's played a majority of the games throughout his career indoors as opposed to outside in the cold in Pittsburgh. Also might be a little bit of an adjustment. So with that, let the Vikings deal with him. Godspeed. Let Minnesota see what I see. And you know what? By the time the insert city here Athletics have their new stadium built in Las Vegas in 2028, right on the Strip, it should be done and line up right around the time with the NFL chewing up and spitting out Kyler Murray when he completely fizzles out of the National Football League. And since the A's still to an extent own his rights, he can give baseball a try when the A's move to Las Vegas, which is probably what he should have done back in 2018. 412-928-9370. Don't let this 20-minute rant deter anybody that wants the Steelers to sign Kyler Murray from calling into my program. I want to hear from you. 412-928-9370. Should the Steelers consider bringing in Kyler Murray on the league minimum next season to be the starting quarterback? 412-928-9370.